Teachers have moral obligations to their students, and especially to student learning. This will be our topic for today. This session will talk about what are the things that faculty owe to our students from a moral standpoint, and then secondly, what is really our purpose, which is our job is to get students engaged and especially to get students to learn. We'll begin with the moral obligations that faculty members have to our students. First of all, I want us to think about that we owe our students a duty of care. We have to care about each student uniquely. We have to let them know that we care about them as individuals and that we want them to learn, and we want to make sure that they feel comfortable in that learning environment. Secondly, we owe each and every student our respect and our trust. By respect, we simply understand their uniqueness. We respect that they bring different things to our classes. They have different viewpoints and perspectives about the topic. They have different attitudes in how they approach their classes. They have different learning styles. We need to respect all those. We also need to trust them. We need to believe that they're going to put forth their best effort. We need to try our very best to help them put forth their best effort. So we must trust and respect each student. Thirdly, we must communicate, and we must communicate again and again and again. When talking about online classes, the standard nationally is that we must communicate with our students regularly and substantively. This really applies to whether it's a hybrid class, an online class, or a face-to-face class. The more we can communicate with our students, the greater clarity it is for them to have in our classes, and the greater learning that will happen. So we need to overdo, if you will, the communication with our students. Our job as faculty is to share our expertise. Each of us brings knowledge. We bring our own background as learners, and we bring our experiences and our respective disciplines. And it's our obligation to our students to share that. And not necessarily from a textbook standpoint, but from a personal standpoint. And we need to let our uniqueness show through to our students as we share our expertise. We need to make sure that we have high standards for our students. We need to hold those to those high standards and help them achieve. But our job is really to be the expert resource for our students, or point them in other directions for other types of resources. Fifthly, we need to be organized. I'm always amazed in teaching evaluations that some student in a class will inevitably talk about how being organized made a difference for them. We may not think that our students are organized, but we must be as faculty members. We must give them challenging assignments, but also assignments that they have great clarity and understanding what the expectations are and how to be successful. We need to be organized each class session. If it's an online class, we need to make sure that we're even doubly organized, because students may not have the time management skills that they need in order to achieve that on their own. So we must be organized to some extent for them as well. Sixthly, we need to provide ongoing constructive feedback to our students. We're the experts, and our knowledge level is so much higher than our students typically, and so we need to understand that they have a high bar to climb, and so we need to help them in achieving their goals for the class by providing them written feedback on our assignments, feedback on exams that they take, beginning with formative exams that are low stakes all the way up to summative examinations like test and final exams. We need to continually give feedback to our students about how they're doing. If they're missing classes, we need to give them feedback. If they look like they're struggling, we need to schedule meetings with them and talk with them about what strategies they're using for learning, and give them some feedback about how they might do things a little bit differently. The whole idea is we want to make sure that our students have enough feedback that they know what the expectations are and how they can succeed. We next need to make sure that the environment that we set in our classroom, in a hybrid setting, or even in an online setting is a student-centered environment. A little bit later on in this session, we'll talk about some specifics about how you might do that. But the focus of our classes should always be on students. It should not be on what we're doing. Sure, we should be organized and we should be respectful, but the classroom, the learning environment is about the students and how we can bring to that particular class our best efforts with a focus on students. Does it take more time to do that? Sure it does. But that's what we're hired to do, if you will. So let's make sure that all of our classes are student-centered. In the era in which we live, justice may have become even more poignant. Fairness and justice is what each student has a right to expect from us and from every other classroom, every other student in our classrooms. Fairness in how we grade. I like to grade all the papers from students anonymously by just asking them to put their names on one sheet only and flipping it over, shuffling papers, and grading them. We need to make sure that we treat every student, regardless of how unique and different each student is, with equity and justice, and making sure we, for example, give all students the opportunity to ask and answer questions in our classes. And then to kind of sum up this particular section of the presentation, we need to make sure that our focus is not on teaching. Our focus is on the students learning. And it took me a while to get that mindset in my own approach to my classes, but it's not about just my preparation or my ability to impart new information or to make linkages between information. If I say it, that doesn't mean that students learn it. So our job in the classroom or any course that we teach, regardless of the modality, is to focus on our students' learning. It's not about covering the textbook or going through all the slides. It's about us as experts deciding what is most important for our students to learn and helping ensure that every single student does learn. That's our job. That's our moral obligation to our students, to focus on learning. Let's move to the second piece of this particular session. And here we want to focus on student learning. And I'm going to give several suggestions in this particular segment for how you may increase the engagement of your students in class, which will engage them more in the learning process with the end result, greater learning. I'm going to go back to that concept of communication. It's really important that we don't make assumptions about what students get out of a syllabus that we might go over on the first day of class. It's really important that we make sure they understand we have effectively communicated what the expectations are in class overall, for each assignment, in preparation for tests and exams. One of the things that I highly recommend that you do, even if you have a large class size, is to schedule one-on-one meetings. So this can be a virtual meeting if you happen to be in the middle of a pandemic. This can be one-on-one sessions in your office. But the whole idea is that student on your class roster stops being a number, stops being where they sit in a classroom, but they become an individual person. I've found that 15 to 30 minutes with each student, one-on-one in a classroom one-on-one conversation makes all the difference in the world for these students. You become a human being, you stop being Dr. So-and-so, and it gives you an opportunity to know where they're coming from, get a little information about their background, determine what their career goals or aspirations might be, and it kind of breaks down those artificial barriers that seem to get more and more rigid as you go throughout the semester if you don't know your students or you don't spend time with them. It's a great opportunity to learn students' names, which I've found over my career to be maybe the most important thing I do is learn every student's name. Another thing that you can do to increase communication with your students are weekly updates. Weekly updates might be a check-in with your students, how they're progressing. It could be an update on any assignments that are due that week. It could be some tips for how to do well on that particular assignment. Or it could be just a check-in, how are you doing, what's happening in your life, is there anything that you need from me? Again, it helps break down barriers. This increase in communication makes two human beings' interaction much more viable for both individuals and makes for a greater learning environment for the students. And then the other thing in increasing communication, remember we're trusting and respecting our students. We need to help them learn how to succeed. One great example of that is asking permission of former students in your class, copies of their excellent work that you can post on Blackboard or make available to students in some format, that an assignment that's upcoming, now they have a model for how to do it well. Or if it's a test coming up, some tips for how to succeed on the test, how to study. Or if a student has done less well on a test, bring them in, have a conversation with them, or post on Blackboard some suggestions of how to study differently or better so that they can succeed. Our goal is not to trip up our students. Our goal is to help them succeed. Increasing communication can do that. Another thing that we need to do in our classes that I think we have a moral obligation to do is to strengthen our relationship not only with our students but among our students. And here, let me just suggest 3 different things that you might consider. At the beginning of each semester, or halfway through for that matter, maybe ask your students to do a selfie. Everybody knows what a selfie is with their smartphones, but do a selfie introductory video. Have a friend make a video on their smartphones telling about themselves, get to know each other, and then post those on your class Blackboard site. And then all of a sudden, students can learn other students, and they can get connected with them electronically via social media, or just have a conversation before, after, or during class as needed. Those introductory videos are a great way, especially in online classes when you don't have that face-to-face interaction opportunity in person. Make those videos as a way to break down those barriers among students. Discussion boards are great for this, especially when you ask your students questions, they respond, but not only respond to your query, but also respond to the post of their classmates. So discussion board classmate posts and reactions to classmates' comments can break down some of those barriers and can help students, again, begin to see their classmates as individuals and as people that they can learn from as well. And then thirdly, under these strengthening relationship ideas, is group work. Group work can be facilitated through something like Microsoft Teams or Zoom breakout rooms or any assignment that you might have in your class. Group work is very effective if you frame it correctly. You encourage students to make progress with some incremental check-ins for you. That goes back to the communication. And you invite them to do group work on projects that they would like to do collaboratively with a little creativity on their side, or maybe study buddies in a group, whatever works for the students, but some way to get them interacting with their classmates. Again, students do not only have to learn from us, they can learn from each other, and that's very important in strengthening relationships among your students. One thing that's really important with today's students with their relatively short attention spans is the concept of interactive lecturing. Now, this is not meant to say that lecturing is bad, because lecturing has its place, but a 50-minute lecture does not have any place in today's college classroom, regardless of the disciplinary content. Interactive lecturing should begin with short lectures. If it's online, probably 10 minutes is a maximum. Maybe in a classroom, 15 would work. But students are simply going to tune out or walk away, depending upon the modality in which you're teaching. So limit your live and video lectures to small chunks, and then immediately after that, start using formative assessments. Formative assessments are low stakes, 5 points, 1 point, small amounts in the overall course grade, but they're really checks for understanding, checking where the students are understanding key concepts that you've presented in the short lecture, ways for students to self-assess. Formative assessments you're encouraged to use throughout the entire semester in conjunction with your lectures, because they will give you a volume of information. You can do that through any of the polling devices, some of those that require clickers that students or apps that students purchase, all the way to Poll Everywhere, which is inexpensive, i.e. free, if you limit it to 40. And you might say, well, I have 80 students. Then have them partner up and do it. There are ways that can be set up for it to go directly into your Blackboard grading system, which makes it a very effective method of teaching. Within interactive, there's that word, active lecturing, is that lectures should be interspersed with active learning activities. What we're talking about here are things that you ask of your students and things that your students do that will get them actively engaged in what's happening in the classroom. I'm going to show you in the next 3 slides over 24 of these kinds of activities. If anyone would like to know the specifics of any of these active learning activities, if you will simply contact me at angela.lumpkin@ttu.edu, I'll be more than happy to share specific details about how to use each of these. Probably the simplest one up there on this particular slide that you can think about is think, pair, share. I like to use this when teaching about teaching, that if you can't think of anything else, do a think, pair, share. It's like asking a question, giving students, as you wait and keep your mouth not moving, ask them a question, give them opportunity to think about an answer, pair up with a classmate, yes, even with social distancing if need be, and then share their answers to the question. Sometimes you can do a report out, sometimes you can make it a think, pair, share, square, and double the number of students so they can share among different ones. That's an easy, quick and easy way that you can intersperse an activity within other short lectures. Guided notes will help your students highlight on the key points or the main points of your particular lecture if you guide them in that particular direction. There's lots of different possibilities on this slide as well as the next one. Write, pair, share is the same thing I was just talking about, except instead of thinking, they actually put words down on their keyboards or in their notes. Check for understanding I alluded to earlier, which is pausing, asking questions, and questions are wonderful, especially if you don't answer them yourself. You give students time to think, and there's a discussion about those answers, and students are encouraged to answer questions freely or through cold calls, calling on students by name, which they love, or feeding into an answer that a classmate said and then enlarging on that. Minute papers is a great way to check for understanding anywhere in the class period, especially at the end, in which you ask 2 questions. What's the most important thing you've learned in class today, and what point in class today are you struggling in understanding? And this gives you an opportunity to find out where students are and make adjustments in your lectures accordingly. I like exploratory writing because it basically takes the questioning strategy and forces students, if you will, to write answers to questions. Starting with Kahoot and moving throughout the rest of this particular slide are examples of review games, bingo, poll everywhere, that's misspelled, poll, P-O-L-L, Jeopardy, quiz, and Quizlet Lite. And these are opportunities for you to go online, and I can send you those URLs, and you can set up any number of ways that you can ask questions of students to find out where they are. You can make them competitive, you can make them just for learning, you can add on low stakes points. They're great ways to enhance student learning. Another thing that's really helpful to students is take the video clips that we oftentimes use, and this is especially poignant for online learning because you can ahead of time use any interactive or any video that you would like to use in your lecture, and you can use feedback fruits on Blackboard. And all you do is you take your YouTube video, for example, and you follow the directions and you intersperse questions on those videos, and you can actually set up that question on the video, stops that already commercial video. You can intersperse your question. You can also make it so that students cannot keep going in the video until after they've answered it correctly, so that they might have to go back and watch the first part of the video to get the answer to that particular question, see if they're paying attention. And that's available on Blackboard. The other two, Ed Puzzle and Play Posit, are examples of doing the same identical thing. Those are commercial products, but they're easy to use, just like Feedback Fruits are. So you go into whichever you've chosen, intersperse the questions, and the students have to answer those questions to continue to watch the video. Great way to make those videos not just entertaining to students, but also learning opportunities. Another thing that's really important to enhancing student learning is the importance of being sensitive to the uniqueness of each and every student. For example, in online classes, it's not if technology problems are going to surface, they're going to surface. It can be a family circumstance with not enough bandwidth for every member of the family. It can be a cut cable. It can be a crash of a system. Lots of technology problems are simply going to happen. So I encourage you to realize that that's going to happen in online classes, yes, even in the midst of taking tests and exams. Be sensitive to that. Work with students if you possibly can, because that's the way to ensure that students are not disadvantaged because the technology problems are happening. A second thing about being sensitive to each unique student is to understand that some of them may have some mental health issues that they have to deal with. In the middle of a pandemic, that might be financial, that might be emotional, it could be family, it could be lots of different reasons. I think everyone understands the mental health issues are increasing among young adults, and we need to be sensitive to that, and then how we're going to accommodate those needs with our students. It's easy to think they may be making up something, or they may be using it as an excuse. I think we have to rather kind of hazard on the side of saying they're real and let's work with our students. And then the last one there is life circumstances. It may be the delivery of their child. It could be a loss of a family member. It could be, as I had in one of my classes, an automobile accident and a severe concussion. Each individual student is unique, and they have circumstances in their life that come up. And life has to go on, so does your class, but being sensitive to those students is really, really important. I want to summarize what we've talked about today as follows. We as faculty owe our students those terms that are listed: caring, respectful, trusting, fair, student-centered learning environment. We need to make sure that we do that for every class period, every online class, every hybrid class. Every time we teach our students, we need to make sure that that is our focus. That and the fact that our job is to help students learn. It's not just to teach. And then secondly, we need to understand that when students are engaged physically, emotionally, and visually in different ways, that's going to increase their learning. So through increased communication, strengthened relationships, interacting learning, we can be more sensitive to their uniqueness and ensure that the outcome really is student learning. Thank you very much.